This PlayStation 4 doesn't turn on. Well, it doesn't want to turn on. The power button does nothing, the eject button beeps 3 times, but when I try inserting a disc, it does start. Sort of. Before revving up the fan, flashing the dreaded red light, beeping 3 times, and turning off. Well, at least there's some power in the system, and it's not completely dead, but that red flashing indicates an overheating issue. The first step to repairing this PS4 is to tear it down. Slide off that left cover, and yes, there's unfortunately no hard drive, so that will have to be replaced if we can actually manage to fix the console. Remove the screws on the back and pop the cover off. And we can see just how dusty this console really is. It's no wonder it's having overheating issues. I mean, look at this dust bunny. It's just sitting here and gross. The fan is also caked in dust, but we'll get to cleaning out all of that once we've fully disassembled the console. A few screws hold the power supply in place, and this is where you really appreciate Sony's efforts to keep their consoles as singular pieces. Xbox for too long just loved having these power bricks on the outside, and while it's so much easier to replace a dead power supply when it's external, it's so much more convenient having it contained inside the console itself. Though it does add some heat to the console, which is why that cooling is oh so important. The good news is, this is as far as you have to tear down a PS4 if you do have to replace the power supply. So we're going to test this out and see if it's outputting the necessary 12 volts. And to do that, first be very careful because this power supply houses some very large capacitors and they can hold a charge for a long time, and you don't want to get zapped with 200, 400 volts, okay? Let's just make that clear. So in order to test this power supply, you actually have to bridge 2 of the pins in this connector here, which is somewhat different than you find on other power supplies. You can't just stick your multimeter probes into the 2 big clips that attach to the board and get a reading. Be careful when removing this wire clip from the board. It was on here pretty tight, and I was very worried I would rip the connector off the board, which would make this into a much more involved and difficult repair. I actually held down the part of the connector that's attached to the board with my fingernail while sort of rocking the connector back and forth to work its way out. With that free, we can now test the power supply. For the original PS4, it's the 2 outer pins on this connector that you have to bridge. And I'm going to use these fine tipped tweezers to do the job. And as you can see, it looks like this power supply is working. Now that we've eliminated the power supply as the issue, which I didn't think it was, let's keep tearing this PS4 apart. A few screws and ribbon cables hold down the Blu-ray drive. Flip the console over and remove the other top cover, exposing the metal shield over the motherboard. And clearly someone's been in here before because there are a lot of screws missing around this console, but that's fine. It doesn't need the screws to work, it just needs to breathe. With that cover removed, we can see just how dusty this board is and how dry that thermal paste is. The only thing to do now is clean it up using some combination of compressed air and isopropyl alcohol. I'll turn my fume extractor on to help suck up some of that dust so it's not just floating about in the air. And that heatsink and fan really show just how gunked up these things can get. I mean, it's just killing the airflow and dropping the thermal displacement. It's no surprise this caused an overheating issue. We can only hope that it didn't do any permanent damage to the board. With the console cleaned up quite a bit, we can reassemble the console and test it out. Still, that power button doesn't want to work, but by inserting a disc, it does still start up. And now it stays on. The blinking blue light goes to a solid white. It's still missing a hard drive, so I had to buy one. Now we can insert that hard drive and discover something that I hadn't realized up until this point. Maybe you already noticed this, and if so, let me know down in the comments below just when you realized what it was missing. And it's the clamp that goes over the APU and really makes that good solid connection to the heatsink and allows the thermal paste to do its job. You see, it's just not there, and I just didn't even realize it because I didn't take it off and it just slipped my mind. But you know, it is a critical piece, obviously, and it's going to need to be replaced. And you know, PlayStation loves their brackets and Xbox loves their X-clamp, but just didn't even realize that it was missing until now. But if you ever wanted to know what happens to a PlayStation 4 without that clamp, well, let's see what happens. Yeah, the jet engine of a fan starts up and soon enough it's back to overheating. And so it could have been the fact that it doesn't have a clamp that was causing the overheating issues in the first place, but there's nothing but a benefit to cleaning it out like this because it was obviously very dirty. And we can fix the issue of not having a clamp temporarily by just putting a little bit of pressure where the clamp should be. This will help keep the APU in good contact with the thermal paste and heatsink. For a more permanent fix, I do have to thank this random person on eBay who had a clamp for sale for $10. Because I don't have any random PS4s just lying around, I'm not that far into the game. But this will keep it alive long enough to restore the PS4 software from a USB drive, and the only thing left to test out is the disk drive to make sure it reads a disk. And while it has a really hard time accepting the disk, it is reading it, so that's a good sign. Unfortunately, I need to tear the console back down to clean up that disk drive. I should have done it in the first place, but I wasn't going to spend time doing that if there were other issues with the console, so now I just have to tear it back apart, and not that big of a deal. And we can see here after we remove the outer shield just how dusty the inside is. And the part we want to focus on are these two rollers here. The one on the right pops up and free, and this white piece comes out, and the roller on the left is a bit more difficult to pop out, but it too comes free. And with them removed, we can clean them with a bit of IPA as well. Now, just reinsert the one on the left, and as for that white piece, it goes in a certain way, so you have to rotate the roller to get it fully inserted. And you do the same for the other side. And reinstall the outer shield. And with that reinstall, we can see if all that effort left us with a better working disk drive. And yes, it takes a disk much better now, which is what we want to see. And now that that's all working, we can turn our attention to that power button and realize that it's actually just a broken piece. The power button is broken. It's supposed to have a little part that sticks out here and makes a connection to this little copper pad on the board. That way when you touch the button, it completes some kind of circuit and turns it on. Since it's broken, it's not making a connection, and therefore when you touch it, it does nothing at all. That either needs to be fixed somehow or replaced, which I'm going to try and fix it first because I guess that is the name of this channel, and I get yelled at by commenters when I buy things that I should supposedly fix. So if you've ever tried to fix a ribbon cable that's been torn, you know that that's just an exercise in futility that is not worth the time or effort. Okay, sorry. I'm going to super glue this paper clip to the power button and see if that works to make a connection. Turns out it does. So once this is all finished up, assuming it all works, I can try to install this in the case, and hopefully we'll have a fully working power button again, along with a fully working PS4. So this goes to show you, if your PS4 or any other console is having overheating issues, don't just get rid of it, open it up and see if it needs a good clean. If you've had it for a while, it probably does. And replace that thermal paste, or liquid metal in case of the PS5. That might just be enough to bring it back to life. That'll do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something useful from it, and we'll catch you in the next one.